Buddham Sharanam Gacchami, Dhammam Sharanam Gacchami, Sangham Sharanam Gacchami. Welcome to the Dharma television. You are watching, following Rinpoche with Sangngak Tenzin Rinpoche, 6th episode teaching on mind training or Lojong. The teaching will be hosted in every Monday and Friday, 3 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. from Bodha Holy Stupa. Now I will request Rinpoche to present the teaching, and Semjin Namje Sambadang Loi Jita Chitawar Chijung Tumung Tebai Chuki Kolo Gordoso.
Domengombo Bardan La Mala, Nyamne Churker, Davi Mukeche, Donjer Gombe Shindo, Yung Lambo, Riparza Je, Wanchen Topper Show. Ola Statani, Nambat Samala, Terang, Taninga Sundani, Tani, Yangchir, Jerbala, Tani, Gauchons.
First of all, I would like to extend my greetings to all of you. I'm so happy that once again I'm able to see you all.
Tatani ngaso taterang dani ngaso tang dani trikpa tere dani ni tang trikpa dela ngaso tengun konda ta karashigire senatani chig nyamlen dani lojong rambati korla dani machi shigire.
Today is the 6th episode on teaching on mind training, and previously we have been talked about how to train mind, and also how we take the step-by-step mind training practice.
Tatani ngaso tani katsong kongdala tani Lodo Namba Je Serva, Otendrigo Carsanani, Lodo Namba Je Cortela Shibare, Tendri Inditani, Ta Lodo Namba Je Gitela Carre Senatatani, Tarui Payun Seni, Tatigo Cortela Shigures.
Previously we have been talked about on 4 thoughts which turn the mind into Dharma, and then following teaching will be benefit of the liberation or the salvation.
Tendri indi ta ngaso koni tene lodo namba jiginoni ta tanjur ke litente Nipur Kawai Batang, Tayang Tani Consegura Tachi, Tani Cheva Matapa, Tani Kori Dingle, Li Jimri, Senra, Tatendre, Tani Lutona Bashu Gorte, Tendretani Shibares.
Previously, when we discussed on the 4 thoughts which turn the mind into Dharma, where we have been talked about precious human life, impermanence of the life, the faults or the flows of the samsara, and cause and effect. Those things we have already discussed.
That indi tendrig te lodo namba jevo te kanre senata ngason teni chu nyamlen chenkenjila tate pe masek ke chembore ten samgoyo za chembore kanre senachi tangkar senachi ta kinzang lami shalong tendrig nangla teni thomo che ngonro se ni ka tamang nang ngonro se ni dendri song yo wa dendri ta ji tamang nang ngonro la tni ji ngonro bomga nyamlen che ya la sok parwa ta dendri yo pa te ge yo mong je tni zawa ta de kanre sen ta tni lo jung ge ta lo do na ba je de la tni ko te ge yo pa dendri ji res.
So as far as we are concerning about the four thoughts which turn the mind into Dharma, is the very important for the Dharma practitioner, because it is the foundation for other practices as well, especially when you go through the teaching on words of my perfect teacher, where it has been discussed on the common four preliminary practice and uncommon five preliminary practices were discussed and taught in that teaching, where it is also clearly mentioned that in order for us to practice the five preliminary practice, we must have to have a good foundation on the four thoughts which turn mind into the Dharma. So that's why the four thoughts which turn into the Dharma is the foundation for all the Dharma practices.
Tatendre indi tani namjin chi ta chu nyamlen chenken nyamlen batang ta chi gumbata zogen nangla tani kangso ta ngunrum bamga sa se ngunrum bamga tani nyamlen chia de ta namjin tani ki chenboji tendre chi zag yorwa inna yang ta chi ngasu ge samlo tangba inna chi ngunrum bamga le chang de ge ngun la kangso te lo dong namba che te pe masak chang tele chang tani ngunden ro goya chi rwa then pe masak ngarang so la chi kel chimboji changde samne otendi samgeyos.
Generally speaking, that we as a Dharma practitioner, we always talked about the 500,000 preliminary practices are crucial for the Dharma practices. However, the far more crucial practice of the preliminary practice is that four thoughts that turn mind turn into the Dharma is far more crucial or important than the 500,000 preliminary practices.
Teni tachi bechi shaba ina tanga so temen nango ngondo go kala ni ta tangbo jamro rwa jamro yin taso karsana ni jamro go teni jete yang karsana jamro jin jikdil ni serwa teni chi khorwi cherga nan chela jikpa tang teni kangso gore ta tepa tendrawa tendra indi taso karsana chi khorwa ding ka ramjenda hamaku ni chi cherga nanchi ga karsana tani jipat tani mesong ba yina tendra ga karsana ni jamro nyamna ni yang yapo yongya te pe kapu rende samgeyos.
So when we talk about the 500,000 preliminary practices, the first one is the practice of the refuge. The main cause for us to generate or have a good practice on the refuge is that we have to have some kind of fear, the fear of samsara, the suffering of birth, aging, sickness and death. So without having this kind of fear, that we won't be able to have a good practice on the refuge.
Teni karsana rangla teni ko dinguk jikpa menna teni janla teni chapsan rogo marwa teni indi taso ta karsana chi dinguk jikpa tela teni dali kanso gore ta chi ngaso karsana teni te chopi ge ding teli chopi ge nipa tadang nipa la so yopi ge te lama kunchok sam la teni chapsan rogo yores.
If we don't have the fear of samsaric suffering, then we won't really have the wish to liberate or wish to to take refuge in the three jewel, because we don't have any fear in the samsaric suffering. So therefore, if we have a genuine fear in the samsaric suffering, then we have some kind of willingness to free ourselves from the suffering, and then therefore, in order for us to free ourselves from the suffering, then we need some kind of refuge from the Guru and Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, and so on and so forth.
Dindi indi ta kansena chi tang korwa tani dinghu ke ramjin imbate ha korwa no tindi chi karsena tani chi cheba chendla yang tani kansagura tani ngarang sola chi jerga nanche tang tindi ke karsena yang janda chi tani ta chi ndopa thokta mkhelwa ndopa tang chepa la sokpa ge ta chi chengen mangbo chi yorwa dindi ke tani karsena nila jikpa tang tani karse shima yena yang kansagura ta chi korwi ge niri kangla chena ta chi dewa chi mandu samne tindi ke karsena tani soso ge dinghu ke ramjin de ha koyong di ta chi korwi ni tila jikpa cheni ta nga kansera ni deya ge ni de mandu ta nga tarwa tobu ge samne ra chi yang kapshok te tani kansagura ta jandak chi la je ya tang o dindi ke karsena ni sammo te lebures.
So if we have a clear understanding on the suffering nature of the samsara, then when we talk about some suffering is not only that not only the suffering of birth, aging, sickness, and death, but we also have a additional suffering that sometimes suffering occurs that without our own choice. Sometimes then we even the wish for happiness, sometimes happiness, the suffering, happiness itself turn into the suffering as well. And also not only in this life, but next life also we may face different kinds of suffering and so forth. And therefore we have some kind of willingness to free ourselves from the suffering.
Dindi te lobjung te menna tani kansogar ta chi chamdro yang tani yapo tani jila che matave atang tani karsana tani ta chamdro ge jitela karsana tani changchib ge semrawa dindi inda ta so ta chi khorwa te tani dingha ka ramjin yimba ge lobjung te me dindi songwa yina tani kansogar ta chi semchen la nyang je yang che ge marwa 어떤들이 되는 영지 되는 지금 말에 되는 영지 맞지나 되는 장집 그 생명 되는 강수 냠는 제 더고 말해 봤어.
So if we don't have a good mind training practice, or if we don't have the good practice on the four thoughts which turn the mind into Dharma, then we will definitely not going to have a good practice on the refuge. And then if we have a good understanding on the suffering nature of the samsara, then we naturally will able to develop or generate bodhicitta. And the cause for us to have a good refuge practice is that we must have to have the generation of the bodhicitta. So without having bodhicitta, you won't be able to have a good refuge practice.
Tini antatawa karsana ten korwa dinget kansuguri shibiga lobjung tetene me somba ina tini kars jila nyangje chegi mundurwa nyangje tini mache somba ina changcheb semde nyamne che tugu mundu tini changcheb semde tini karsana tini nyamne che matu somba ina ta tini karsana tini sanji gu kompang tobya yomarwa kurang tini restin.
So if we don't have a good understanding or the thorough understanding on the suffering nature of the samsara, then we will not going to have the good practice on the refuge, nor we will not going to generate bodhicitta, since we do not understood the suffering nature of the samsara. And not only that, then without having this understanding on the suffering nature of the samsara, there won't be any liberation, because we do not have the refuge nor bodhicitta.
Tatani karsana, tenrega karsana chi, ta 다다가 롭종 때더니 로동 남바지 롭종 때더니 야보지 몰란 롬메나 딱강서 그런가서 리 짐리세야 될라용 이치 템부든리더니 용식 말와 리 짐리라 이치 템부 용그 말에 드니 강서 그렇다 리 짐리라더니 이치 템부든리 메송바 있나 지금 강서 그런가랑 속이 지금 도르지 셈바 곰디 냠는치니 이잠범 ter사와라 소바테요 지금 파처 장가 잠나 차가 이게 든리게 냥가 요러봤든
So without having good understanding or the good practice on the foundation of the four thoughts which turn the mind into Dharma or the four mind training, then we will not going to have a following the preliminary practices such as the bodhisattva, the Vajrasattva practice. Vajrasattva practice, we cannot have the good practice unless you have the good practice on the four thoughts which turn the mind into Dharma. Otherwise, your Vajrasattva practice becomes only counting of the number, not genuine practice of the Vajrasattva.
Tende indi ta li jimdi se te la iche tembu tende karsana tende me sondi taso digba nguma chiba ngun sak digba taso la yang njoba che mare serwa tene njoba che mare tene kansa gore ta chinjengi digba tene che men samje ga kansa gore tene tamja tene karsana tene tembu yo mare te ma soina tata konti shiba na jinta dursam gumdi igja sampate ho ta pache tangka samjig ma to tunda chimbu me ba tende chaya ga ninka yo rest.
So without having good foundation on the practice of four thoughts which turn the mind into Dharma, we will not even going to have the faith in the law of cause and effect, nor even we will not going to have the remorse feeling of mistake or the negative karma that we have accumulated. And even if we accumulate the hundreds of thousands of the Vajrasattva mantra, will not going to bring any the purification or the effects on our practice.
Tende ngaso dorsam gomdiga ta nyamnen de karsana ni cha tangdamba yongor cheba la yang karsana tani kansa goreta limrig li jimrig lobjong de la tingdingda tende indi ta li jimrig lobjong de la karsana chi ni tani sosogo lobjong che tende jidali na tani nyamnyong chi che ngishi chi yo songdi taso ta karsana tani dikpata ni ngarshi dikpata so la yang tani kansa goreta tani jobachi semga na che gere tani semna jobachi 송아당 되니 신체 땅에 던지듯이 제금은 삼제가 던져갔더니 강수고 돔셈 용거래 던지지 그거니 되니 돌섬 곰디 냠는 남바 있나요 딱으로 님부 또 비제당 담바세라 어떤 그 가르스나더니 고 차당 담바 냠는 차당 담바 던지 용약을 레와요레스.
So to have an authentic practice of the Vajrasattva, then we must have to have the good foundation on the practice of four thoughts which turn the mind into Dharma. By having that authentic practice, then your practice of the Vajrasattva will become more authentic, because you will going to have a faith in the law of cause and effect. And also if you have made any mistake, then you will have a remorse feeling. And not only that, then even if you made any mistake or the negative karma, then you will going to make a pledge that from today onward I will not going to repeat the mistake that I have done so far. So even if you recite the Vajrasattva mantra, the mantra recitation will be more effective and authentic practice.
Tatani tendre karsana tani lobjong te tani karsana ni ke chembondu sin karsana tamo cheingonro se nangonro se ni ta nangonro to sola kansa gore ta chingonro bamga saya to so nyamna chetang damba jirwa dendrego garsana nyamnan yaboju yongayala ta ngundani lodong namba jig lobjong te gogundga dene garsana te lobjong lodong namba jig lobjong ga garsana tene yaboju yosongbayina ti jega kansa gora ta jig hondrom bongwa ga nyamnan to sangma te garsana ni pensum sokpa yongya ga kansa gora ta kondewa dendri yores.
So the outer four common practice and inner 500,000 preliminary practice. So in order to have a good practice on the 500,000 preliminary practice, we really have to put importance on the practice of four thoughts which turn the mind into Dharma. And if you have a very good on that practice, then all the following practice will become more authentic.
Tatani Kandresana Tani Takanzala Michelong Nala Kandresana Lodon number Jiroa, Nilodon number J take Gitela, Tatari Pine de Share Reservatani, Tari Pine de Share, the young Kandresana, Chilodon number Gitela, Tari Pine Jaguaya Teon, that Jimri 20 quorum said Tendrigo Carsanati, Tendrici Dalinatani, the Consogoratani, Lodoko Gitela, Tarwa Tobji Samnira, what in the Tarwig Lamte Carsanatini Sheba. Yes.
So the words of the My Perfect Teacher, where you will see the teaching is a sequence of the first that you will see the four outer common preliminary practice, which is the four thoughts which turn the mind into Dharma. Then after that, there will be explanation on the benefits of the liberation. So the reason why it has been made in such sequence is because after having thorough understanding on the law of cause and effect, and having good practice on the four thoughts which turn the mind into Dharma, then we will able to understand there is liberation, and there is by liberating there is a benefit. So we will have a more understanding on that.
Tani karsana tanga songkorwi dingete ngopchi dingete mangboshi sherwa tendre shedalina tani kanso gora chi tarwi ge panyense ya tendre lamga janda chi tanya me songbayina tako mse kanso gora ding gram jenda tawa serwa tendre chi dalina tani ko shira pando chimbuchi yo marwa tani ding gram jenda shini ina yang chi nangba sangjibi ge chude tendre mare se karsana chi deli karsana tani tang korwa ding gram jena chumde serwa lamga janda chi de se lamga janda te kanresana oni tarwa seneteni tarwi ge karsana ni payin tang tarwa donde nyere teresten.
So the reason why the sequence is made in such way is because that in the beginning, when we talk about the four thoughts which turn the mind into Dharma, where it has been mentioned of suffering nature of the samsara, and where a lot of sufferings were discussed on the four thoughts which turn the mind into Dharma. So then the following chapter is started with the benefit of the liberation. The reason why it has been mentioned or explained the benefit of the liberation is because since the samsara nature is suffering, then of course there is another possibility that we can actually take part, which is the liberation, is also explained in the Buddhist teaching.
Tendri mambo chigla tani ta thari phayan de sheba yina ani khongso tani towa chegre sarwa o tharwa la thopa yina tharwa ka karsana ni phayan de yore tani karsana shankham do sola tani karsana yunden dang tani karsana de yore sini tharwi ge phayan de karsana mang se ji jache ngoptu jiba yina ne khongso la towa je ne ro to nang je de o nga goya te der ndse tendri ji dalina yang karsana tharwa donde nyen keng tendri ge de shayang tani mambo.
So there are many individuals that after hearing or understanding on the benefit of the liberation, then they will get more inspiration or the delightful or the they sort of like get more inspiration to take part on the liberation. They will understand there is the possibility of liberation.
네 지금 영은 자 semjin 가시지 가르스나 온 코르와 딩을 그람전레스니 든지 라바이나 코노서 냐냥 든르 무tonken와 든니 가르스나 든니 대 신영양 마tonken 고 든리 요레스 든리 인나양 다 지고 냐냥 마트로와 당 신영 마트로와가 강스 그래 콩코르비 딩 든니 가르스나 든니 메바 착거레메스나 대 메바 착마레스 베지 작바이나 가수 즈포테 가르스나 네바이나양 소소그 딱시자니 시 마폴와인 나드니 가르스나드니 나바임바 소소 신용 마트나 드니 가르스나 그 나사데 메바 착거레즈나 작마르와 드니 마치가 홉세지가 니선 자자 차야고 년카든지랑레스.
There are some individuals that when they hear about the suffering nature of the samsara, they don't really like to hear that. They don't really want to understand the suffering nature of the samsara. However, if you do not wish for hearing or understanding suffering nature of the samsara, is it going to be eliminated by itself by not hearing the suffering nature of the samsara, or not by understanding the suffering nature? So for example, if you are sick, then you cannot say that I get sick but I do not wish for death. But sooner or later when you get sick, you may end up dying. So it's like you cannot say that I don't like to hear the suffering nature of the samsara. So not hearing will not going to eradicate your own suffering. So suffering is still will be there.
네 벤나 가르스나 소소그 즈포테 네바 차바 있나 가르스나니 디소 딱딱라 딱실 주소로와 든리바 있나 가르스나 영 답시 요로와 만사야 당 든리게 답시 요레 이나양 가르스나 오 데니 가르스나 소소그 나바 나이 바트니 가르스나 소소 든리 요바 하고 진데 강서 그러다 지 딱시 제냥 맞출로 와로와 든리게 드는 즈보라 나드 가르 요메다 답시 당 세가세지가 대트분데 도서 상마 지 강서 그랬더니 딱시 제야가 가르스나더니 모바 메바 뭐든지 이나다니 마치가 홉세지가 디스 통동지가 곤자작 차야 그래 데레 마톡더니 잔다 가르스나데 데 답시 야호즈지 말았을
For example, if you are not feeling well, health-wise, if you are not well, it is a good idea to check time to time. But if we do not really check our own health and our body system, then slowly the pain or the sickness that we may have on our body will getting worse and worse. When it gets worse, then eventually it will become more serious sickness. In the same way that if we don't really try to understand the suffering nature of the samsara, then we will not able to have the genuine wish to free ourselves from the suffering nature of the samsara.
근데 다지 공도시바 나오신 데시아 다솔라 양지 타르비가 가른 고르비가 딩은냐냐 뭐 그런 게 마음보지가 지 타르비가 연된데 지금 마음 어쩌지니와 타르비가 반인당 상금 그 디르질라 소파 지가르스나 오다 든지 그 지금 마치바이나 공소 쪼아지니와 오다 가고야 돼 데렌드 세니더니 가르스나 양 돈데니엔 겐든지 마음보 요레스.
And those who do not some individuals, those individuals who do not really wish to hear the suffering nature of the samsara, then it is wise to let them hear or understand the benefit of the liberation or the enlightenment or the structure of the pure land and so on and so forth.
나서 다트닝 가서 가르스나 지티 소가 왕가 대랑 가서 되니 대잠지 되니 그 잠샤인 양가서 가서 그래 당 되니 지말한제요.
So due to the time the consume, that we will going to end the teaching here. So we will see you next time.
So nam de tamje zba ne tomne ne